was laughing. That's the image I keep coming back to. My sister, standing in the kitchen of the house I grew up in, laughing at something on her phone while I stood there holding a piece of paper that had just ended my life as I knew it. She didn't even look up. I should back up. My name is Leah. I'm 31 years old. I work in supply chain management for a mid-sized pharmaceutical distributor in Columbus, Ohio. I know that sounds boring. It is boring, honestly, but it pays well. Better than most people my age expect when they hear the title, and I've been with the company since I was 24. When I started as a logistics coordinator and worked my way up through 2 promotions and 1 department restructure that somehow left me better off than I started. I tell you all of this not to brag. I tell you because what happened to me gets dismissed when people hear the number. They assume I must have done something wrong. They assume there must be another side. And I want you to understand before we get there exactly who I was and how I got there, so you know there is no other side. I grew up in a 3-bedroom ranch house in a suburb of Cincinnati. My mother worked administrative at a school district. My father bounced between warehouse jobs and then eventually settled into being a shift supervisor in a food processing plant. Were not bad people when I was very young. I don't remember them being cruel in those early years. What I remember is being overlooked. My sister is 4 years older than me. Her name is Tara. Tara was the one who played varsity soccer. Tara was the one who got the car at 16. Tara was the one who, when she cried, my mother would cross a room to comfort, and when I cried, I was told to go wash my face because dinner was almost ready. I'm not saying my childhood was a horror story. It wasn't. What it was instructional. I learned early that if I wanted something, I would have to earn it myself because no one in that house was going to hand it to me. So I did. I got a job at 17 at a dry cleaner 2 miles from our house. I saved everything. I applied for every scholarship I could find, filled out the FAFSA before my friends even knew what it was, and got myself through a state school on a combination of grants, work study, and a small student loan that I paid off 18 months after graduation. While Tara's boyfriend at the time, they've since broken up, married other people, gotten divorced. It's a whole thing. Was covering her rent in a nice apartment near the short north. I was splitting a 2-bedroom with 3 other women and eating a lot of rice. I didn't resent it. That's what I want to be clear about. I was proud. There is something that happens to you when you build your life entirely on your own effort. You start to feel the weight of every dollar differently. You track things. You know where everything is. By the time I was 28, I had paid off my loan, built up a solid emergency fund, and started maxing out my 401k. I had also, through a combination of disciplined saving and a few smart decisions, a rental property I bought with a partner at 26 that we sold 2 years later at a significant gain, accumulated a savings account that sat, as of the morning the story really begins, at $312,000. $312,000? I know what the comments say. How did she save that much? Is this real? Let me explain because the math matters. My base salary at 28 was $87,000. After taxes in Ohio, I took home roughly $5,400 a month. My rent was $925. My car was paid off. I cooked most of my meals. I don't drink. I don't smoke. I didn't take vacations that cost more than a few $100s. My biggest expense most months was my gym membership and the bi-monthly dinners I had with my coworker Pam, who became one of my closest friends and who I will get back to. Between my salary, a side consulting arrangement I had with a smaller company that needed help with their inventory processes that added maybe $18,000 a year, and the profit from the property sale, I've been putting away between $2,500 and $4,000 a month for 6 years. Every single month, without fail. The account was mine. Only mine. It was at a credit union, not the bank my parents had helped me open when I was 16. I had opened it specifically when I started making real money because I wanted something that was separate, that felt like mine in a way the old account didn't. And yet, my father knew about it. I had made the mistake. And I know exactly when I made it. I can place it precisely of mentioning the account balance over Thanksgiving dinner 2 years before any of this happened. My mother had made a comment about how I always seemed stressed about money, and I had, in a moment of wanting her to understand that I was actually doing fine, that I had built something, mentioned the number. My father's expression changed. Not dramatically. He didn't say anything. He just shifted, like a door closing very quietly, and something in me registered it, but I didn't know what to do with it, so I filed it away and drove home to Columbus the next morning and went back to my life. The morning this begins, I was in the ICU waiting room of Riverside Methodist Hospital. My grandmother, my father's mother, a woman named Dolores, who had been one of the most consistent presences in my life, who taught me to play cards and called me on my birthday without fail every year, and who I had driven 2.5 hours to see on holidays since I moved away, had collapsed at her home on a Thursday night. A neighbor found her. She was 81 years old and had been having what her doctors would later describe as a series of small cardiac events that she had not mentioned to anyone. I got the call at 11:30 at night. I was in bed. I was up and in my car by midnight. I sat in that waiting room for 6 hours before a doctor came out to tell me that my grandmother was stable, but that she had significant blockage and that surgery was going to be necessary. He explained what the surgery would involve, what the recovery would look like, what the risks were. He was kind. He was patient. He answered my questions even though I was clearly running on no sleep and my voice kept catching. My parents arrived around 7 in the morning. My sister arrived at 10. She stopped for coffee. She had a drink with a straw and a name written on the side of the cup. We sat in the waiting room together and we waited. My mother cried at intervals. My father stood with his hands in his pockets and stared at the floor or at the television in the corner of the room. My sister was on her phone. I sat by the window and watched the parking lot and thought about my grandmother's hands, which were soft in a way hands get when they've worked for a long time and then stopped. At some point, the conversation turned to the surgery costs. My grandmother had Medicare. She also had a supplemental plan. But there were expenses that were going to fall outside of coverage. Private room considerations, some of the specialist consultations, the physical therapy she would need afterward if she made it through. The hospital's financial coordinator had spoken to us briefly. The number she mentioned, the potential out-of-pocket gap, was around $40,000. My father said he didn't have it. My mother said they had some savings, but not that much. Not liquid. Not accessible quickly. My sister said nothing. I said, I can cover it. I have savings. I'll take care of it. My father looked at me. Not with gratitude. With something else. Something I couldn't quite name in the moment, standing in a hospital hallway at 9 in the morning after being awake for almost 30 hours. I thought it was relief. It wasn't. 3 days later, my grandmother came through the surgery. She was weak and tired, and the recovery was going to take months. But she opened her eyes and she recognized me, and she held my hand with her soft hands and said, "You look terrible, sweetheart." And I laughed for the first time in what felt like a very long time. I drove back to Columbus that evening. I had to be at work the next morning. I had calls scheduled, a shipment audit that couldn't move, a meeting with our regional director that I had already postponed once. I got home at 11. I showered. I set my alarm. I was asleep by midnight. At 6:15 in the morning, I woke up to my phone buzzing. It was a transaction alert from my credit union. Withdrawal $18,500. I sat up in bed. I opened the app. There was another one, $22,000. Timestamp was 3 minutes before the first. I was still not entirely awake. I thought maybe I had done something, moved money for the hospital payment, set something up and forgotten in the fog of the last 4 days. I scrolled further. $15,000 and $9,000 and $27,000, $11,200. 7 transactions over the course of 48 hours. All withdrawals, all wire transfers, all initiated through the online banking portal. The total was $214,000. I sat in my bed in the dark with my phone in my hand, and I could not breathe. I called the credit union the moment they opened. I was on hold for 11 minutes. When the representative picked up, I told her what I was looking at. She pulled up my account. She asked me to verify my security questions, my address, the last four of my social. Then she was quiet for a moment. She said the transactions had been initiated through the online portal using correct login credentials. She said there had been one failed login attempt 5 days earlier, followed by a password reset using the email address associated with the account. My email address, my secondary email, the one I had used when I opened the account 7 years ago and had since stopped using regularly but had never closed. The one that used a password I had written in a small notebook I kept in the junk drawer of my childhood bedroom. The last time I'd used it was when I was home for Christmas and needed to log into an old account for something. And I hadn't thought twice about pulling that notebook out at the kitchen table while my father sat 6 feet away. I understood then. I understood all of it in one single moment. The way you sometimes understand things, not gradually. Not with evidence assembling piece by piece, but all at once, like a window shattering. He had seen the notebook, or he had watched me open it. He had the email password. He had reset my banking password through that email. He had wired the money and multiple transactions, probably to stay under reporting thresholds. He had done this while I was sitting in a hospital waiting room watching my grandmother recover from heart surgery, while I was telling him I would cover the costs. While he looked at me with that expression I couldn't name. I filed a report with the credit union's fraud department. They told me that because the transactions had been completed using correct credentials obtained through what appeared to be an authorized account reset, the process for recovery would be complicated and would require law enforcement involvement. I called the Columbus Police Department and was referred to a detective who handled financial crimes. I was told it could be several weeks before anyone was assigned to the case. I called Pam. I need to say something about Pam. She is 53 years old. She's been working in logistics for 27 years. She is the most pragmatic person I have ever met in my life. When I called her at 8 in the morning, sobbing in a way I had not sobbed since I was a child, she listened to all of it without interrupting and then said, "Okay, first, don't contact your family yet. Second, do you have a lawyer?" I did not have a lawyer. "I'll get you a name," she said. "Don't touch anything. Save every notification, screenshots, transaction records, everything." I did everything she said. By 9 o'clock, I had screenshots of every transaction, every notification, the timestamp of the failed login attempt, and the password reset confirmation email that had come through on a day when I was quite clearly at a hospital 40 miles away. I also had the name of an attorney from Pam, a woman who specialized in financial fraud and civil litigation. I called and left a message. She called me back within the hour. Her name was Ms. Aldrich. She was direct in a way that I found, under the circumstances, deeply comforting. She asked me specific questions. She wanted to know the nature of my relationship with the suspected party, the documentation I had, whether there had been any communications that might constitute an acknowledgement. I told her everything. She told me that what I was describing constituted identity theft and wire fraud under both Ohio state law and potentially federal statute, depending on how the funds had been moved. "The federal angle matters," she said, "because if any of those wire transfers crossed state lines or went through a federal institution, this goes to a different level entirely." She asked me not to contact my father directly. I agreed. That lasted 4 hours. He called me at 2 in the afternoon. Like nothing. Like an ordinary Tuesday. He asked how I was doing, how the drive back had been, whether I talked to my mother about visiting my grandmother the following weekend. I let him talk. Then I said, "I got the fraud alerts from my account." Silence. Not the silence of someone confused. The silence of someone recalibrating. He said, "What alerts?" I said, "The wire transfers, $214,000, sent over 2 days while I was at the hospital." He said, "I don't know what you're talking about." And this is the part I still think about, the part that made something go cold inside me that I'm not sure has ever fully warmed back up. he said. You probably shouldn't have told everyone how much money you had. Like I had done something wrong. Like I was the one who had made a mistake. I hung up the phone. My hands were shaking. I texted Ms. Aldrich. He called. He denied it. He said I shouldn't have told people how much money I had. She texted back within minutes. Good. Document it. That's useful. My mother called that evening. I didn't answer. My sister texted me, "Why are you being weird? Mom says you accused Dad of something." I took a screenshot of that too. The following 2 weeks were the most disorienting of my life. I went to work every day. I sat in my meetings. I completed my shipment audit. I drove to my grandmother's rehabilitation facility on a Saturday and sat with her for 3 hours while she did her physical therapy exercises and complained about the food and asked me if I was eating enough. I did not tell her what was happening. She had just survived heart surgery. She was 81 years old. Whatever was coming, she did not need to carry it. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, Ms. Aldrich had filed a civil complaint. A detective had been assigned to the criminal case. The credit union's fraud team had traced the wire transfers to 2 accounts, one at a bank in Indiana, one in Tennessee, and had flagged the transactions to the relevant financial institutions. Because the transfers had crossed state lines through the federal wire system, the FBI's Financial Crimes Division had been notified. I found out my father had a cousin in Indianapolis. I had met him twice at family reunions. He drove a very nice truck for someone who, as far as I knew, worked part-time at an auto parts store. Miss Aldrich explained to me, in terms I will not pretend to fully understand, that the money trail was becoming clearer. The funds had moved in stages. The transfers to the Indiana account had been withdrawn in cash within 24 to 48 hours of arriving. The Tennessee account was murkier and was under active investigation. My sister knew. She hadn't moved the money. She hadn't done the technical work, but she had known. This came out not through any confession. She's never confessed to anything in her life. But through a text message she sent to a friend that the friend, apparently troubled by what she'd been told, provided to the detective. In the text, my sister said, "She's never going to miss it. She doesn't even spend it." I read that in an email from Ms. Aldrich, and I sat at my desk at work and stared at the wall for a very long time. I called my mother that night. She cried. Genuinely, I think she's not a performer. She said she hadn't known, and I believe that's partially true. I think she knew something was wrong and chose not to look at it directly. I think she decided, as she had decided many times throughout my life, that what was happening to me was less important than keeping the peace in her house. I said to her, "I need you to understand that I'm not going to protect him. I'm not going to minimize this or keep it quiet for the sake of the family." She cried harder and said she understood. I don't think she understood. 6 months after those wire transfers hit my account, my father was arrested and charged with identity theft, wire fraud, and unauthorized access to a financial account. The charges were filed at both the state and federal level. His cousin in Indianapolis was charged separately. My sister was not criminally charged. The evidence of her direct involvement in the financial transfers wasn't sufficient, but she was named in the civil suit. My grandmother found out. I had been trying to protect her, but she found out the way people find out things they were being protected from. Through a fragment, a overheard phone call, a grandchild who didn't know she was in earshot. She called me from her room at the rehab facility. She didn't say much at first. She asked me how I was. I said I was okay. She said, "You don't have to say that." So, I said, "Some days are harder than others." She said, "He was always looking for the easy way, even as a boy." She said it simply, the way you say a thing you have known for a long time, and I held the phone and looked out my window at the street below and let the words sit. The civil case resulted in a judgment in my favor for the full amount plus interest and legal costs. Whether I will ever actually collect all of it is a different question. That's the part no one tells you, that winning a judgment and receiving money are 2 separate events with no guaranteed relationship. But the criminal case moved. The federal wire fraud charges carry serious consequences. Ms. Aldrich told me not to get attached to a specific outcome. And I've tried not to. What I know is that the investigation is real, the documentation is solid, and that for the first time in my life, the systems that are supposed to protect people seem to actually be working in my direction. My grandmother came home from rehab in January. She is slow, and she tires easily, and she needs help with certain things she used to do without thinking. I drive to see her twice a month. We play cards. She makes comments about my driving and asks when I'm going to find someone nice to settle down with. I tell her I'm focusing on other things. She says that's what women say when they don't want to answer the question. I laugh every time. She is the reason I had the money. She is the reason I needed it. She is, when I really examine all of it, the clearest thing in a story that has a lot of murky parts. I don't speak to my father. I don't speak to my sister. My mother calls occasionally, and I pick up sometimes depending on the day. We talk about my grandmother, about nothing important, and then we hang up, and I think we both understand that we are maintaining something more like a formality than a relationship, and neither of us says that out loud. There are people who ask me if I'm angry. I am. Sometimes, not all the time, but it's there. A particular kind of anger that comes from being underestimated by people who are supposed to know you better than anyone. The assumption that because I was quiet, because I didn't demand things, because I kept my head down and worked and didn't make my success into a performance, that I wouldn't notice, that I wouldn't fight back. I noticed. I fought back. There are also people who ask if I'm sad. And that one's harder to answer because what I feel is something adjacent to sadness but not quite it. It's more like grief without a body. The loss of something I'm not sure I ever really had, which is different from losing something real. You can't mourn the parents you deserved if you never had them. You can only learn, slowly and sometimes painfully, to stop expecting them to become those people. What I have is a savings account that is being rebuilt, slower than before, but still, a job I'm good at. A friend named Pam, who showed up for me in a way that I still don't entirely know how to repay. A grandmother who plays cards with me twice a month and gives me grief about my love life and is, as far as I can tell, exactly as stubborn as she was before any of this happened. And I have this. The last time I was at my grandmother's house, I found one of her old recipe boxes on the kitchen counter. Little handwritten cards. Her handwriting. Round. Careful. The kind of handwriting people had when they were taught to write in school like it mattered. On the back of one of the cards, a recipe for something with apples, she had written, "For Leah." Not for the family, not for the holidays. For me. I don't know when she wrote it. I don't know when she wrote it. I don't know if she knew what was coming or if she was just thinking of me on an ordinary afternoon. But she had written it, and it was there. And I took it home and put it on my refrigerator. Some things were always mine. They just took me a while to find them. I've thought a lot about what made any of this possible, not the theft, but the recovery. And I keep landing on the same answer. I had built something real before any of it happened. Not just the money. The habit of building. My father assumed I would fall apart. I think that's what he was counting on, that the shock would be so total, the betrayal so disorienting, that I would go quiet the way I had always gone quiet when things in that house were unfair. He had watched me absorb things my whole life. He had watched me work twice as hard for half the acknowledgement and say nothing. He thought that was who I was. He was wrong about what that silence meant. The silence was never weakness. It was accumulation. Every year, I didn't spend money I didn't need to spend. Every hour, I put into a skill that made me more valuable. Every time I chose the harder path over the easier one, that was all going somewhere. It was building a version of me that could survive exactly this, not because I planned for it, but because the habits of a disciplined life are not situational. They don't turn off when things get hard. If anything, they become the only thing that holds. There's a version of this story where I collapse, where the betrayal is so total, so intimate, that I can't find my footing. And I won't pretend I didn't spend some mornings in those early weeks sitting in my car in the parking garage at work, unable to get out, just staring at the concrete wall in front of me. Those moments were real. But I got out of the car every single time. That part is also real. What I've come to understand is that what my father did was not really about me. It was about his own relationship with what I had built. He looked at my savings and he saw an injustice. Not the injustice of what he was about to do, but some imagined injustice that I had what he didn't. That I had been quietly successful while he had felt passed over by life. He dressed that up as opportunity and called it something other than what it was. But the name for what it was is theft. And theft, when it is documented and reported and pursued by people who know what they are doing, tends to have consequences. Pam used to say, "You can't control what people do to you, but you can control the quality of the paper trail you leave behind." She meant it practically as professional advice. But there's something in it that applies to a life, not just a lawsuit. The quality of the record you build, the choices, the work, the integrity of the small daily decisions. That record is what you stand on when everything else falls away. Dolores, my grandmother, played cards with me last Sunday. She beat me twice and claimed the third game was a tie, which it was not. She looked out her kitchen window at the yard going soft with late winter and said, "You know what I'm most proud of?" I assumed she was going to say something about the family. She said that you didn't let him take your character. He took your money. You got that back. Character, you can only lose yourself. She's right. That's the only thing in this story I was never in danger of losing.